Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing with you my go-to sourdough sandwich bread recipe, and I'm also going to give you a little peek into my baking routine and how I really make making our own bread totally feasible as a busy working mom of 3. So I am really excited to share this recipe with you guys today because I feel like it's the first time where it felt like a home run, where I was like, I can actually, A, I can make this, and B, my kids actually like it, and C, it is incredibly nourishing, nutritious, healthy. So it's just like an all around win of a recipe. And I can't tell you how many times I've tried different sandwich bread recipes and they're just okay. Like, they just don't taste that good. And I have made this every week for months now. Like, we love it. All 3 of my kids will eat it. My husband eats it. I love it. It's a winner. Now, you can obviously buy bread at the grocery store, and my guess is you probably do. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. We bought bread from the grocery store up until just a few months ago. Now, I will tell you, grocery store bread is so vastly different than like real bread. Now, if you've ever gotten into, like when I first got into sourdough and started making bread with literally just like flour, water, salt, and starter, it just tastes, it tastes so good. It just tastes so different. Like, it is not, what you see in the grocery store is not really bread. It is a commercialized, really kind of tweaked food item. It has so many added ingredients so that it can be really soft and pliable and shelf stable for a really long time. If you've made bread at home, you know that after just a few days, it goes stale, it will go moldy quickly. Like, you really don't have a ton of time to eat that bread, versus breads that you'll find on the grocery store shelves will last for a long time. And that's because the recipe and the dough and all of the things that are added to it keep it, it's preserved for longer, and it's has like gluten added and oils added, so it's more soft and more pliable. So basically, it's just a very different food product than what you're going to make at home. And unfortunately, there ends up being a lot of sacrifices when it comes to nutrition. I don't think it's all bad. I think if you're gonna buy bread from the grocery store, I would forego the bread aisle like pretty much completely, and I would go to the bakery section and I would buy bread there, because it is going to be fresher, it's going to have a lot less ingredients, and it's gonna be much closer to something that you would make at home. But nothing will beat home baked bread when it comes to flavor, when it comes to texture and taste, but also when it comes to nutrition. And I want to teach you guys how this really is realistic to do at home. Even if you are busy, you're like, when am I gonna have time to start making bread, Becca? Like, trust me, I get it. And it's taken me a long time to get to this point. And now I'm like, why didn't I start this years ago? It's really not a big deal, especially when you get into the routine of it. It just becomes part of something that you do. And it's actually kind of easier because you always have bread, because you know how often you need to make it. You can make some ahead and freeze it to be even more efficient. We're going to talk about that too. But first, let's talk about the recipe that I use. Okay, so the recipe that I have been using, it's my go-to, is actually not mine. It is from this book by Melissa K. Norris, who is one of my favorite like homestead, cooking from scratch influencers, if you will, to follow. I found her years ago. I have learned so much from her. I've been so inspired by her. She is like a 5th generation homesteader. She grew up this way, cooking from scratch, being more frugal, making everything yourself at home. And I just love that. So I've been really inspired by her, and I love this book. I have like 50 pages dog marked. It's got flour all over it. Like, this is a very well-loved book in my kitchen. It has so many recipes, and I can't recommend it enough. I will link this book down below. If you're looking to just start cooking more from scratch, like making your own condiments, different dessert recipes, dinners, breads, all things sourdough, all the ferments, like, this book is amazing. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick second to tell you about my nutrition and intuitive eating program, Mindful Eating Made Simple. This program is all of my knowledge, education, tips, expertise, experience, all in one place, where I teach you everything you need to know about not just nutrition, but also how to eat in a way that is healthy and balanced for the lifelong. I am a firm believer that you need to be equipped both with robust nutrition knowledge that makes sense, that can be applied to your daily life, but also understanding how to eat intuitively, because I believe that that is the only way to enjoy eating, but not go overboard and be able to maintain health and vitality through your lifetime. So if you are just done with being on a cycle of dieting and trying this diet and that diet and failing and trying again and all of that nonsense, or maybe you're just trying to eat healthy, but you find nutrition confusing or you find it stressful and you feel like you kind of end up turning it into a diet in itself and you just can't do it in a way that is relaxed and sustainable and balanced, then this program is for you. I will personally be here to hold your hand and walk you through as you build on this new knowledge and make these changes. My mission is to help women feel confident with healthy eating, but without the complex. And that is exactly what I do in this program. So I will leave a link down below if you are ready to join me inside the program. And maybe you're still on the fence. And if that's the case, I would highly recommend taking my free mindful eating mindset masterclass, where you are going to start to learn how to break down that diet mentality, how to eat healthy for the long term in a way that's balanced and sustainable, and also avoid some of the most common mistakes people make when it comes to healthy eating. If this sounds like something you are needing in your life, I so hope to see you inside the program. I want to help you make the changes that are actually going to give you your freedom back, give you your life back, and allow you to eat in a way that has both enjoyment but nourishment at the same time. So I follow her like whole wheat sourdough sandwich bread recipe, and I have it just written on this little piece of paper that I just keep in here because I literally reference it so often I don't even want to like have to go to the page. At this point I almost have it memorized, but this is the recipe that I follow, and I follow it almost to a T. Maybe I do like one thing different as far as like the kneading goes, but I follow her recipe otherwise. So probably the biggest thing I love about this particular sandwich bread recipe is I can use 100% whole wheat flour. I don't have to add any white flour or like, you know, all-purpose flour to make it lighter and fluffier and not as dense. I use totally whole wheat flour that I grind myself, and that is going to be the most nutrient-packed flour you possibly can have. And the loaf turns out beautifully. It rises well. It's pretty light and fluffy. It's not this like hard, dense, like gummy wheat bread. It is so good. And of course it's sourdough, so it has all those benefits of the long fermentation where all that phytic acid is going to be broken down, a lot of the gluten is going to be broken down. It's just a much easier to digest bread, and that is again a total win for me and for my family. And it really is very hands-off. I have never had this like bread recipe be a fail. I've made it so many times. I've messed it up sometimes. It always comes out pretty good. It's always very edible, and we always eat it. It never ever goes to waste. And there are like two different ways you can go about this as far as the routine goes. So I make bread on every Monday. It's literally in my mom minder. If you guys watch that video, on Sunday I have written down to feed my starter so that it is ready to go, and then Monday is usually when I bake the bread. But there's two ways that you can do this. Her recipe calls for, you know, feeding your starter the night before so it's nice and bubbly and active in the morning, and then you mix the dough in the morning, and then it's basically sitting out on your counter most of the day, and then you would bake it later in the day. Now you can do it that way. I find it's even easier to mix up the dough the night before. So I will feed my starter, let's say like around lunchtime or in the morning, somewhere in there, and then at night after the kids go to bed, I will mix up the dough, and then I will put it in the fridge overnight, and then in the morning I will just pull it out, put it in the loaf tins, let it poop proof in there, and then I will go on to bake it. So it's just, I don't like mixing up dough in like the morning crunch when we're eating breakfast and the kids are crazy. Like that is just like not what I want to do. I want to do it when everyone's asleep and it's quiet and I can like put on a podcast and make it like a nice little moment for myself. And I would say that like just brief effort after the kids go down, when you're mixing up the dough, that's usually when I just want to like crash on the couch at the end of the day. And that is really like where most of the work is. Everything else is incredibly hands-off and very easy, but it's just kind of incorporating and kind of getting in the habit of just, you know, one night a week or however often you're gonna do it, mixing up that dough. It really is not that big of a deal. Okay, so let's get started making this whole wheat sourdough sandwich bread. So the very first thing I do is I grind my flour. I use hard white wheat berries that I buy in bulk, and I have a, it's called the Nutrimil Harvest. I can link this down below too. This is definitely an investment, you know, just like any other appliance in your kitchen, but I feel it is well worth the money, especially if you're gonna be doing a lot of bread baking or really baking anything at home. Having fresh ground flour is so nutrient dense. As soon as those wheat berries are ground up and exposed to oxygen, the nutrients and the enzymes and the fats will start to break down. So if you buy flour that's been sitting on the shelf for months and months and months, it's lost so much of its nutrition, versus when you make bread with like home ground flour, it's almost like, I mean, I hate this word, but it's almost like a superfood, just because it is so much more nutrient dense than any bread that you're gonna find packaged in the store, or any flour or any bread you're going to make at home from flour that's packaged and bought in the store. Now, if you don't have a grain mill to grind your own flour, that's totally fine. You can just use whole wheat flour. You could even use all-purpose flour if you wanted to make a white bread. Regardless of what kind of flour you're using, you're going to set that aside for now, and then we're going to put all of the other ingredients together and then add the flour last. So first we're gonna do 2 cups of starter, and I'm just adding this to my stand mixer. You don't have to use a stand mixer. You can do this by hand. Certainly, it's definitely just a much easier shortcut and makes this a lot more simple of a process, and it takes less energy on my part. Then to the bowl, you're gonna add 1.5 cups water, and then 6 tablespoons of melted butter. You're going to add 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of salt, and then 1/4 cup honey, just to add a little bit of sweetness to it. You could also use maple syrup as a substitute as well. So then in my stand mixer, I get it going, and you basically want to combine all of those ingredients together. I do just use the dough hook to do this because it mixes it up just fine, and it's one less thing I have to wash, since I will obviously be using the dough hook in a minute to knead the dough. Once all of those ingredients are well combined, next we're going to add in our flour. So I feel like this is really where the magic is, because we are sifting the flour beforehand. Now this is definitely like an extra step, but it really doesn't add that much time or effort, and I feel like it has a big payoff with how the bread tastes in the end. It helps it be a lot more light and fluffy and not super dense. If you're gonna go to all of this effort, you want it to be something that you actually enjoy the taste of and that you're actually going to eat. So I do feel like sifting the flour is so worthwhile. So basically when you sift it, it's going to incorporate air into the flour, which helps create like a more fluffier bread. Now I'm not separating anything out of the flour. All of that whole wheat flour is still going in the bowl. We are just incorporating air into it, and any of the flour that is like too big to go through the sifter, I just pour in at the end. So now it's time to mix everything together and to knead. So I will put the dough hook back on, and I will let it, I will use that to mix everything, combine everything up, and also to knead it. Now I add I do 5 cups of flour. Her recipe calls for 5 to 6. 5 always works perfectly for me, and I do just add all 5 cups. I sift all 5 cups in, and then I mix it, instead of doing like 1 cup and mixing it in at a time. I feel like it makes no real difference in the end product, and it saves me time. So I will knead and mix up that dough for 5 minutes, and then I let it sit for 10 minutes. So the only reason you'd have to do this is if you are grinding that flour fresh, because it needs a little bit more time to kind of soak up the moisture. If you're just using, you know, store-bought flour, you can go ahead and skip this step. And then after letting it sit for 10 minutes, I will get the dough hook going again, and I usually let it go for about 10 minutes until the dough just looks a little bit more like elastic, a little bit more like a dough versus a batter. I think she says to go just for maybe 5 minutes, but I accidentally left it once, like forgot about it and let it go for a little while longer. And I found that it actually turned out, I feel like I liked it better in the end. Honestly, all of these little tweaks, I feel like they don't make that big of a difference. I am no artisan baker, I'm no perfectionist. I'm just trying to make bread that's healthy for my family to eat. So I don't think you need to be super crazy about all the details, especially if you're just feeding your family. So my advice is definitely to not sweat the small stuff. But anyway, so once that is all mixed up, you're going to go ahead and cover it. You can use, you could use plastic wrap, or you could use like a wet towel, and just let it sit somewhere for about 3 to 4 hours. If you're mixing up the dough in the morning, if you're mixing up the dough the night before you want to bake it, which is typically what I do, you're going to want to go ahead and just stick it in the fridge and just let it sit in the fridge until you wake up in the morning, and then you can pull it out. But if you did mix up the dough in the morning and you're letting it sit out, you want to let it sit out for about 3 to 4 hours. And then you're going to scrape the dough out of the bowl, plop it onto the kitchen counter, and then you're gonna split it up into 2 pieces because we're making 2 loaves with this recipe. So then you're gonna wanna roll it up into like loaves. You can see here on YouTube, there's like all kinds of videos that show you exactly how to roll up or create different shapes of breads. For this one, I literally just create like a rectangle. I stretch the dough out. I start to roll the dough, and I just kind of pinch it off with my hand as I go. And it just kind of rolls up into a log, and then I just tuck the ends and stick it into a greased bread pan, and then you're going to let those now sit out again. So this is what's considered the proofing stage, and you're gonna want to let it rise until about doubled, which is gonna be about 3 to 5 hours. Now, a tip I learned recently when it comes to baking bread with home ground flour is that you actually don't wanna let it rise until it's fully doubled. Just a little tip for you. But if you're using regular flour and that's not the case, then you are looking for it to double in size. The warmer it is in your kitchen, the faster this process is going to go. So if it's like peak summertime, this might move pretty quickly. If it's the dead of winter and your house is chilly, you might want to put this bread in like specifically like a warm spot so it doesn't take a super long time to double. But once it's reached that ideal size, now it's time to bake. So you're going to set your oven at 400 degrees to preheat, and Melissa actually recommends in the book to go ahead and put the loaves in while the oven is preheating, so that it just gets a little bit of extra heat. And she says that little bit of extra heat really helps with the oven spring, meaning like how high the bread rises. Now, to be honest, I've never tried not doing it this way, so I don't know like how much of a difference it makes, because it works. And I feel like they always turn out well, so I just have never messed with it. But so you put them in like in a cold oven, you set it to 400 degrees. Once it's fully preheated to 400, you're gonna let it go for 10 minutes. And then once that 10 minutes is up, knock it down to 375 degrees for another 10 to 15 minutes. So you're looking for the tops to get a little bit like that golden toasty brown. And once you're there, go ahead and pull those loaves out. They are done. Let them cool in their loaf tins for a little while, so they can really be fully set. If you try and rip them out of there when they're piping hot, they might crumble on you. And you obviously don't want that, but if you let them sit, they will be like a beautiful, solid loaf where you're not gonna be worried about that at all. Hey you guys, okay, brief interruption because I wanted to show you something. This is a perfect example of why your home bread baking does not have to be perfect. And if you like mess it up sometimes, it's okay, it's gonna turn out just fine. So today, my house must be much warmer than usual. I mean, it is very humid outside, and my bread proofed very quickly, like usually you proof for like 3 to 5 hours. It proofed for about 2.5, and it did not need nearly that much time. I was actually gone, I went to a dentist appointment, didn't think thought they'd be fine proofing while I was gone. But I ended up having one that proofed a little too much, and it's kind of like a muffin top, and it started spilling over the edges a little bit. So not ideal, but guess what? It's fine. It's going to taste fine. It's sandwich bread. This is not like artisan level. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're still gonna eat it, and it's no big deal. And once they have cooled down, you can pop them out of the tins, go ahead and slice them up so that they are gonna be ready to eat. And then I just store mine in a plastic bag, and I just use these plastic bags over and over and over again. And these loaves will keep for like about a week. These don't mold nearly as quickly as like a traditional sourdough bread that's just like water, salt, flour, starter. So that's good, but you can also freeze these if you want. So I feel like when you're baking them, you know, fresh each week, that's always going to taste the best. However, that might not be realistic for you, or maybe you just like don't want to be baking every week. You want to use your oven less. You want to like, you know, knock out a lot more loaves when you're going to have all the, you know, you're getting the dishes all dirty and you're pulling all the ingredients out. I totally understand that. So what you can do is you can actually freeze them. So if you're going to freeze them, here's what you're going to do. So I just ran to my freezer and I pulled a loaf out that I have in there. So basically, once they are fully cooled, like let them sit out for as long as possible, so that you're not putting them like warm and like sweaty into a plastic bag. But so let them cool down, put them into your plastic bag, squeeze all the air out, and then just go ahead and stick it in your freezer. And then whenever you are ready to eat that loaf of bread, what I would do is, and what I do, is pull it out like the night before and just sit it on your counter in the bag, let it defrost overnight, and then by the morning, you should be able to slice it up. There are probably ways where you could do this in a way that preserves it even more. This is like the quick and dirty method because like I said, I'm not an artisan baker. I am not a perfectionist. I just want to make good food in a way that's really, really realistic for me and for my family. So this is one way that you can do it. And it might not be, you know, the taste might not be spot on with when it's fresh and never frozen, but I still feel like it's pretty good. And when in doubt, you can always toast bread. When you toast bread, it gets a little Maillard reaction going, a little browning, a little crisping, and it totally brings it right back to life. So maybe that is a solution for you if you don't love the way that it tastes after it's frozen. But that is another way that you can make this even more realistic. Maybe once a month, depending on how big your oven is, you just jam it full of a bunch of loaves of bread and you knock out like 4 or 8 or however many at once. And then you put the rest in the freezer. And then as you're going along and you need bread, you just pull one out the night before, let it thaw, and you've got fresh, homemade, nutrient-dense bread. And remember, when you're freezing it, it's going to lock in all of those nutrients and the enzymes and whatever else. It's not going to degrade like it would if it were, you know, sitting out on a counter. It's not going to mold or anything like that. It's going to be very well preserved, both for eating and then also nutrition-wise. So that is it, you guys. That is my go-to sourdough sandwich bread recipe. Again, I will link Melissa's book down below. Highly recommend. I just really, really love that book. I feel like it's such a good, just like little investment for your kitchen, especially if you're trying to just cook more from scratch, real food, and just kind of make a shift towards that in your cooking and in your kitchen. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I hope you will test out this bread if you haven't already. I'll also link my grain mill down below if you're in a place where you are ready to make that investment, or maybe you've got a birthday coming up, or you're adding it to your Christmas wish list early. I love that thing, and I feel like it really is such a great purchase. If you're gonna be, you know, doing this, you're gonna be committed to making bread and lots of other grain-based things for yourself or your family. If you guys are new around here and you haven't subscribed yet, I would absolutely love for you to subscribe, join my little community here on YouTube, and please, as always, leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of videos that you guys would like to see next, because I so value that feedback. I find it so helpful, and I obviously want to make videos that you guys want to watch. So be sure to do that. But that is all I have for this video. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.